What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another video. We did the rookie running back rankings on Wednesday. Today, I'm going to take a look at the rookie wide receiver rankings again for redraft. If you want Dynasty, look on the website. This is a redraft video. Just be talking about what to expect from these players, where I have them ranked, where the ADP is, maybe who are the best sleeper picks, things like that for redraft leagues. So we'll start off number one ranked player, Jaxon Smith-Njigba, taken 20th overall by the Seattle Seahawks. My wide receiver 30, ADP 29, so I'm right at ADP. I'm using Underdog positional ADP for this because it's what we have that is most accurate. At times, that will lean towards stacks, so sometimes players who are really easily used in stacks will be a little bit higher, but again, it's the best positional rankings we have right now. Later in the season, maybe we can use something else, but JSN, my wide receiver 30, that's around like the mid sixth round. And when I say the round here, I'm going to be talking about like a generic league. So not in best ball, just in like a normal 12 team half PPR league, because that's what I'm using for the rankings here, half PPR, mid sixth round pick. So I think that general range kind of makes sense for him. We know Metcalf is going to be their best wide receiver this season. We know that JSN impacts Lockett more. Lockett and him going to rotate in and out probably when they do two wide receiver sets. You would hope that they go to a lot of three wide receiver sets. They can really perform well in that area. They were not a team that used that at all really last season. Some people concerned they're not going to make that move. I can't imagine Pete Carroll is so dumb that he wouldn't go to a lot of three wide receiver sets. It just sets up so beautifully to put JSN in the slot and just run that like literally like 90% of plays. The problem with ranking him like higher is that I quite honestly do not trust Pete Carroll to make intelligent decisions. And so we don't really fully know if that's going to happen. But he's worth it at this spot because worst case scenario, it's still a good offense. He's still a really good talent. We just know he's going to be successful. We know he's going to score fantasy points. He deserves to be the top wide receiver in the rankings and the first player in the S tier. But right behind him, and the only other player in S tier, is Jordan Addison. Of course, going 23rd overall to the Vikings. My wide receiver 33, so only a few spots behind JSN. It's around like that round 6-7 turn in a 12-team league. Underdog ADP wide receiver 35, so a little bit of value there. For I think the first like 5-6 wide receivers we'll talk about, I basically have them at ADP. And honestly, ADPs right now are incredibly sharp. I would say Addison has room to rise a little bit. It's just the dream landing spot. I mean, it was just perfection. Easily the wide receiver 2 now for the Vikings. You're just going to have so many plays where obviously Addison's not as good as Jefferson. Jefferson, the best wide receiver in the league. He's going to be double teamed. They're going to have coverage shifted over to him. Like there are just going to be plays where the defense is like, listen, we have to double team. We have to put extra coverage towards Jefferson. I don't care what Addison is doing right now. If we leave Jefferson one-on-one, he is going to have like, 200 receiving yards against us. And that is going to leave Addison with so many single coverage looks, so many looks where he's just like, not really being defended to the level that a lot of other wide receiver 2s will be. This is on a team that we are very confident is going to finish, top 5 in pass attempts this season. They're going to score plenty of touchdowns. They're going to be in plenty of high-scoring games. It makes all the sense in the world to take Addison around this range. Again, only other player in this tier. As we move beneath that, we're going to start off with Quentin Johnston, if I can find him down here. There we go. First player in A tier, 21st overall by the Chargers. My wide receiver 45, so you can see that little bit of a jump from Addison down to Quentin Johnston. That is like the late 8th round, so about a round later. Underdog ADP 43, so right in line there. He is one of the players I kind of talked about where it's like people who maybe landed like, honestly, you could do like a triple stack. You could have Herbert, Keenan Allen plus Quentin Johnston, but The point being, people that took Herbert are going to be leaning towards Quentin Johnston, that maybe is elevating his ADP more than you would see in like a redraft league. So I think my ADP, or my ranking, I guess, is more in line with what you're going to see, but it's like 2 spots back. But that's really where he's going to go, is that late 8th round, maybe into the 9th round in hometown leagues. They really just wanted someone who is, I don't want to say more athletic, because, Keenan Allen's athletic. He's not a great athlete, but he's athletic still. Mike Williams, obviously very athletic, but someone who can like create after the catch, right? That's not really the area that like Keenan Allen wins at. He gets open in the middle of the field. He doesn't necessarily someone who you're giving screen passes to or getting the ball downfield and they're making people miss, turning, 10 yards into 30 yards, right? That's what Quentin Johnston's going to do. He's going to have a role in this offense. They're going to throw it a ton. It's a lot of the same positives as Addison, but it's just slightly of a worse spot. You've got 2 other players now on the Chargers plus Keenan Allen, plus Austin Eckler. So you've got Keenan Allen, you've got Mike Williams, you've got Austin Eckler. You've got a lot of players who are commanding targets. That's not the same thing on Minnesota. That's why Addison gets the leg up on him. After that, we go down to Zay Flowers, and if we want to downgrade situations, we're going to have to downgrade that again. Of course, Flowers going in that same spot, going 22nd overall, but to the Ravens. And among the team we've talked about today, Baltimore, obviously the team that, we're expecting the least from in terms of passing production. And so if, Flowers had ended up on the Vikings, we'd probably be talking about him in that S tier. Right now I have him as wide receiver 50. That's around that round 9-10 turn. On Underdog, it is the wide receiver 44. So he's about 6 spots ahead of where I have him. I looked to try and move him up, but it was a little bit difficult. There's a lot of really good players in that like 40 to 50 range for wide receivers. And when we're thinking about the ceiling, it's not that I don't think he can be the number 1 wide receiver on Baltimore, because honestly, like, I absolutely think he can be. I believe at 50, like, he's either projected to be that or is like ranked right next to the other 2. It's just that you have Mark Andrews there. So it's a similar situation with like Kansas City, where you're like, you can be their wide receiver 1, but like they have Travis Kelce, right? So Andrews is going to be their top target. And so at best, Flowers is the number 2 target on a team that's not going to throw it a ton, going to run for a ton of touchdowns. It's not like something where you're looking at it and saying, ooh, this is really nice, like wide receiver 1 potential. We can see that in some other players. With Flowers, because the ceiling is capped a little bit, I'm not as willing to reach. So totally fine, if he falls past that 44, ends up at 50, top wide receiver on the board, totally fine taking him, because I really like the talent. Not a player I'm going to reach on. So probably not a player I'm going to end up with a ton if he stays, maybe like around an ADP ahead of where I have him ranked. Those are the only 2 players in the A tier. We'll go down to the B tier now with Rashee Rice. There we go. Put him up there. Late 2nd round by the Chiefs. That was earlier than a lot of people thought he would go. My wide receiver 60, Underdog wide receiver 60. That is the round 11-12 turn. So we're really starting to get into sleeper picks at this point. Just landing spot, really. I wouldn't say that he's a lock to like, be their wide receiver 1. I believe we talked about him last week, and just that like, there's a lot of wide receiver 2s. Will Tony break out? Will Sky Moore produce better than last season? Will MVS do something for, really the first time in his career for full season? Probably not on that one. But the point is, they've got a lot of players where it's like, maybe it's this one, maybe it's that one. We don't really know at this point. And just based off of that, if Rice ends up being, the top producing wide receiver on this offense, he's obviously going to outperform the wide receiver 60. It's just this low because you have Travis Kelce. The indication right now, and my guess, is that Tony will be the 1. And so if Rice ends up being the number 2 there, that's going to hurt. It's going to make him very volatile. Everyone in this offense is going to have a very, very high ceiling. And so on a site like Underdog, you can benefit from that. In a redraft league, you're not benefiting from it as much. But I think just landing on this offense, being a good talent, a 2nd round pick, it makes sense that, he's got plenty of upside this season. If you want to use him as a sleeper pick, totally fine doing that. After that, Jonathan Mingo. We've got early second round ADP for him. Like I said, I talked about him last week as well. That was earlier than like average mock drafts had him going, but there were a lot of people who thought the mock drafts were off towards the end, that there were a lot of indications that he was going to go earlier than the mock drafts were kind of having him. Ends up going to the Panthers. My wide receiver 61, Underdog 58, so I'm a little bit behind there, but let's be honest, that's off by like barely any. Early 12th round is where that ranking would be. And this is a player I'm definitely fine reaching on. My model comps him to Deebo Samuel as like far and away the number one comp, just like athletically, where they were drafted, just everything matches. And if the Panthers are going to use him like, the 49ers use Deebo Samuel, that's going to be, really good in fantasy. I wouldn't say that, he's a lock to be that, because Laviska Shenault also shows up as a comp in the model. But just given the way they've talked about him, given that we're pretty confident he's going to be a good talent in this league, they invested a lot of draft capital in him. And I mean, let's be honest, like the level of competition on the Panthers now that DJ Moore is not on the roster, it's Adam Thielen, DJ Chark. I mean, there's really just not a lot holding him back from being the top target, like the number one target on this offense. And anyone who has that in the range of outcomes could be the number one target is a really good pick in this general range. So if you wanted to reach for him, I'd be totally fine doing that as well. Obviously, we know if Rashee Rice ends up as the number one wide receiver on Kansas City, well, that's better than being the number one wide receiver on the Panthers. So you still have to take into account that the offense isn't going to be as good, but Bryce Young looks legit. He looks like a very, very good talent. So definitely upside with Mingo. Last player in this tier, Josh Downs. Mid-third round by the Colts. My wide receiver 65. That's like the early 13th round. Underdog ADP 72. So we're a little bit ahead of ADP on this one. My guess is that he's going to be their slot wide receiver. It's really going to be how often can he get onto the field with Alec Pierce there, because obviously Michael Pittman Jr., the number one. He's going to be on the field as much as he can play. He's going to be the top target, best wide receiver in fantasy. That's a lock to happen. Number two, it's like Alec Pierce, they also have draft capital invested in him. He's a good player. I wouldn't say he had an amazing rookie season, but he's definitely a good player, definitely, a decent talent. But would I be shocked if they just like Josh Downs more, if Josh Downs outproduced Alec Pierce and can get onto the field in two wide receiver sets? Maybe not all the time, but sometimes. I would not be shocked if that happened. If it did happen, he's going to blow past this ADP. But it could also just be a situation where they want to go to a lot of three wide receiver sets. They want Downs on the field. I think he's a really good wide receiver. I think he's being undervalued right now. I do believe he's a really good sleeper pick. C tier. This is basically where, we're getting into a lot less likely that these players break out. We'll start off with a player that, if you've been following me through the process, I don't buy it. I don't think that Jalin Hyatt is, a high-end talent. I don't think he's going to produce amazingly in the NFL. He headlines C tier. He was taken the early third round by the Giants. My wide receiver 74. That's the mid 14th round. Underdog ADP 61. So I won't be getting him on an underdog. That would be the place where I would actually be okay with taking him. And I do give him a boost. So my rankings for underdog give boost to players who are going to be volatile, going to have downfield roles, because underdog capitalizes on that. And then I decrease the value on players who really just have a short game role, aren't going to have a ton of spikes. So he's boosted on underdog. But even then, I'm 13 wide receiver spots behind ADP. I just don't buy it. I don't buy the production. Obviously, he was highly productive in college, but virtually all of the routes, all the touches he had in college, all that production is coming on plays that are simply not going to happen in the NFL, like those one-on-one from the slot with a safety. Like, that's just not happening in the NFL. Those stack sets, not happening. And he's on the Giants. It's like, I guess similar to some teams we talked about where they don't have established ones, but they have a lot of decent players, and honestly a lot of players that I think are just better than Hyatt. And it's also not, a high volume passing attack. It's not a high end passing attack. They're going to run for a ton of touchdowns. They're going to run the ball a ton in general. And so I'm not on Hyatt, but if you want him, you're probably going to have to take him in like the 13th round. There are just other players I would prefer over him. After that, we've got Jayden Reed, mid-second round by the Packers. That was definitely earlier than everyone had him going. My wide receiver 80, Underdog 77. That's like the mid-15th round. So I'm a little bit behind there. My only hesitation with Reed, I think he's a really good talent. I think he can break out. And if he does, I mean, let's be honest, it's going to be like him and Christian Watson because he can pretty easily surpass Romeo Doubs if he's breaking out. But I do see a world where like Watson's entrenched as the one, that Doubs in his second season, I mean, he was awesome in camp last year. He had some good weeks like during the season. Had to suffer through a bit of injuries, but he clearly like is a good player. He's clearly better than his draft capital was last season. So I could see a world where Reed is more of like a 2B almost. Like you have Doubs as the 2A, Reed is the 2B, which is kind of rotating in snaps. And now it's not with Rodgers. Now it's with Jordan Love. And there's a lot of risk that comes with that. What does the offense look like? How many touchdowns are they scoring? How efficient are they? Like, there are a lot of question marks here to where I don't feel comfortable putting Reed in the same tier as Rice, Mingo, Downs. There's just a lot fewer question marks I have with them than I do with Reed. But again, there are some people I like really respect in the industry that are like all over him, that think he's a true breakout, like a really good player. And if that ends up happening and he ends up being the wide receiver 2 here, and if you're getting a wide receiver 2 on a team that, isn't going to be trash, right? Unless Jordan Love is awful, they're probably not going to be, a bottom 5 team, right? They're going to be below average, but not bottom 5. It could be, really good in fantasy, maybe second half of the season. Again, probably leaning these other players over him. Last player in the C tier, Marvin Mims, late second round by the Broncos. I really wanted a better landing spot for him because I think he can be a really good talent. And I'm also not super encouraged about the things they're saying. They're basically like, listen, we like Sutton, we like Judy, we like Tim Patrick. We're going to use Marvin Mims, but it's almost like they're alluding to they're going to use him in the role that they had like Kendall Hinton, KJ Hamler in last season, where it's like a field stretcher, downfield role, which is like what Mims is really good at. But I think he can be more than that. I think you can utilize him as your number 3 wide receiver. And it just feels like a lot has to go right for him to shatter this ADP. So totally fine. Like, again, this is mid 15th round. If you want to take Mims in that range, that's absolutely fine to do so because he's got a lot of upside and I think he has a lot of talent. But, if he's going to be behind Sutton and Judy on a team that last season was dreadful, they have to be a lot better than they were last season to be like, supporting a number 3 wide receiver. And if you also have the chance that he's really the number 4 and only this downfield role, that's going to be really difficult to trust in redraft leagues. I don't see how in that role you're getting to a spot where you're like ever starting him on a championship team unless you're in like a 16 team league. So it's tough to move him up. Hopefully what happens is in camp, he plays really well. We get some reports that he could be the number 3 wide receiver. He can earn more of a consistent target share and not just these designed downfield looks, because that's what we need for him to move up even higher. D tier. We'll start off with Nathaniel Dell. If we can find him, there he is on the bottom. Early 3rd round by the Texans. Reports were that Stroud was like, kind of like, talking and be like, hey, let's get him on the team. I guess they like texted or something like that and being like, you guys should draft me. So a little bit of chemistry there. Hopefully we can get some like breakfast narratives on that front. I basically have him at ADP, wide receiver 83, Underdog. He's at 86. We're looking at like the late 15th round for Nathaniel Dell. Obviously everyone knows the size concerns, very small wide receiver. Obviously this offense, we're not projecting to be amazing, not projecting to be a high scoring offense, not projecting to be a high volume passing offense. So it's not an amazing landing spot. I would say he went earlier than some people thought. Some people were thinking like, for how small he is, he could just crater in the draft. NFL teams would be like, no, don't want him. It seems like they do want him. The problem is it's just not a great landing spot. Like for him to truly break out, to be a wide receiver 2 in fantasy, a lot of things need to go right. Stroud needs to be awesome as a rookie. Dell probably needs to climb the ladder and like be their top wide receiver, which I still think would be a surprise. So late in best ball, sure. Late in like deeper formats, sure. I don't know. I mean, again, we're in the D tier. I don't buy it for him, especially in his rookie season. Someone that I could see it happening for, though, Cedric Tillman. The path is thin. He was taken early third round by the Broncos. My wide receiver 86, underdog 91. I thought I'd be behind ADP, but at wide receiver 91 ADP, it's tough to really be like behind that. It's like the mid 16th round for my ranking at wide receiver 86. I'm pretty sure that Amari Cooper is going to be the one, right? I feel like that's pretty easy to say. I'm also fairly confident that Elijah Moore will be the wide receiver 2 because I've been higher on Elijah Moore than most people. Didn't work out in his time with New York. I think he's a really good talent. I think he can produce for the Browns. My guess is also that Donovan Peoples-Jones is better than Cedric Tillman because, again, Tillman on that same offense is high. I don't trust production over there. But definitely a chance that, like, had Tillman not gotten injured, he would have been the one putting up just crazy numbers in that offense. He would have gone earlier in the draft. People would have been talking about him a lot more. So I think there's a chance he's just like better than people think. I wouldn't say I'm like some huge Donovan Peoples-Jones truther. So like if he was going to end up as the 3, Cedric Tillman there, I wouldn't be shocked. And this is an offense that I'm expecting to throw it a ton this season. Throw it a lot more than most people are projecting. Do plenty of 3, maybe even 4 wide receiver sets. So even if Tillman is only the 3, which again is certainly possible, he could still be on the field a lot. And if that happens at 91, as one of your last picks, and maybe your last pick in a redraft league is one of your last picks on Underdog, there's upside there. And it's easy to complete the stack. If you can't get anything else, you've got Watson. Well, Cedric Tillman's sitting there very late in the draft. Again, I wasn't high on his talent coming out, but I think people are maybe a little bit too low just because I think people are under projecting the Browns offense. E tier. 3 players go in this tier. We'll start it off with Tre Tucker. I don't even think I talked about him in the first video. Went way earlier than people were expecting in the draft. Late third round by the Raiders. My wide receiver 95, underdog 147. So here's the first one where we're seeing like significant value on Underdog. If you want to take him with your last pick, that's totally fine. I mean, this is late 18th round ADP at 95 anyway, so we're already at that last pick. Last pick in a redraft league, sure, do it there. I would say the upside comes on the report that if Hunter Renfrow is not going to be on the team and the team believes Tre Tucker can be that wide receiver 3, well, there's the upside, obviously. And he can have a downfield role. He can have that high weekly ceiling, and he's not going to cost you anything, obviously, if I'm, 50 spots ahead at wide receiver 95. Wouldn't say that I thought he should be a third round pick. I thought there were other wide receivers that deserved to be picked ahead of him. But yeah, you're basically banking on Hunter Renfrow leaving, him being the 3 on what will still be a pretty decent offense. Other 2 players that go in here, Kayshon Boutte and Michael Wilson. Don't have strong takes on these players, and basically every single other player that we have on the screen here is going in F tier. All I'm going to say about like the remaining players on this list is if you have a take, if you really like one of them, don't be afraid to take them in the final round. And that's even final round in like a redraft league. If you are a huge Kayshon Boutte fan, you think he can be the wide receiver 1 on New England. Basically, the thinking there is, well, he was highly productive at a very young age at LSU, suffers all the injuries, never really came back from that. You think, well, it's just the injuries. He's eventually going to get better. He'll reach that form. He's going to be the wide receiver 1 in New England. I want to take him in the last round pick. Feel free to do that. If you just think about a narrative basically with all of them. Michael Wilson, maybe you think DeAndre Hopkins will be traded away, that Marquise Brown is their 1, that Rondale Moore is just never really going to hit, and you think Michael Wilson can be that wide receiver 2 on, let's be honest, a team that's going to lose most games this season, going to be throwing it late and get garbage time points. There's the path. And there's some people who think Michael Wilson's, getting a bad rap really in this whole process, that he's actually like a really good wide receiver. Just find a narrative. I put Tucker, Boutte, Wilson in the E tier because I can see those scenarios happening. I can see a world where they actually are productive, even in like a redraft league. I put everyone else at the bottom. A.T. Perry, and this is in no particular order, really. A.T. Perry, Bryce Ford-Wheaton, Parker Washington, Trey Palmer, Tyler Scott, Xavier Hutchinson, Charlie Jones. I put them all at the bottom because I don't really see it. Maybe Charlie Jones if you get like Tyler Boyd gets injured. If then while that's happening, you also have like Higgins or Chase missing a few games and they need to rely on Charlie Jones. Sure, I think he's more of a long-term option for the team. I don't see it happening this season, and he 1,000% needs an injury for it to happen. But yeah, I mean, everyone in that tier, like, I mean, you better be in a league that's got like 20 rounds to really be drafting them. It's not really worth it. I would stick to everyone else I talked about because there's still plenty of wide receivers we went over in the rounds before that are available in the final round of the draft. It's like just go with those players. Don't worry about the F tier. So that was rookie running back rankings for redraft. Next Friday, we're going to do, or I believe it's next Friday. It might actually be the following Wednesday, but in a week or two, we'll do the overall wide receiver rankings for like, you know, not just rookies, for really just talking about everyone there. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about the players who have been rising the most in ADP over the last week. And then Monday, an episode of Mock Draft Monday. So that'll do it for this one. Hope you all enjoy. If you did, how about hitting the like button? How about subscribing to the channel if you're new here? Thanks for watching.